Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. Today on this episode, we're going to be talking about walking topwater baits. This is one of my favorite categories of topwater baits because you can cover a lot of water with it and it calls fish out of, pretty dense cover, but also out of deeper water, but you can catch them shallow too. So we're going to be talking about this, and I'm going to show you how to retrieve it and some of the key little details you need to pay attention to when fishing this bait. But first, I just want to mention that I'm going to be fishing the Dick Hiley Bass Classic up in Minnesota, May 3rd through the 5th. That is a St. Jude benefit fishing tournament, which I'm really excited about because St. Jude is obviously near and dear to my heart. My daughter is currently going to St. Jude in Memphis for neuroblastoma cancer, and they are a wonderful organization that deserves all the attention that it could possibly get. And so I'm eternally grateful to them. But I'm going to be fishing this tournament, which has raised a ton of money, I think millions of dollars over the years. And I'm going to be fishing with my buddy, Scott Kinninger. And our team, we're trying to raise as much money for this cause as possible. All of it goes to St. Jude. And so if you're interested in donating, anything helps. I have the link in the description below that you can click on to help us raise as much money as possible. And, if we end up winning, I'm gonna just end up giving it back to St. Jude anyways. So anyways, guys, just wanted to mention that it's a awesome cause and it's gonna be a lot of fun to finally fish a tournament in 2024. But anyways, let's get back to fishing. Let's talk about the walking bait. So walking baits are a category of topwater bait. I think there's no doubt that the Zero Spook is kind of the front runner. When people think of a walking topwater bait, they probably think of the Zero Spook first. This one right here is the Jaywalker from Berkley, Jaywalker 100. There's a lot of different walking baits on the market, and there's a ton of really, really good ones. So, it really just depends on the situation and what each walking bait does differently on which one you might want to choose. But today we're using the 100 Jaywalker, and I'm going to go through the tackle real quick because I think that's super important, just as it is for most techniques. Essentially, we've got a leader material. This is actually really, really important to remember because I use a braided main line. Today I'm using a 30-pound Tactics braid from Seagar. And then I put a short monofilament leader. This is 15-pound test monofilament. And the reason why I put 15-pound test monofilament on here, and when I say short leader, I'm talking about like 12 inches or under. This is actually a little bit too long for what I like. But really, you don't need it very long. As long as it's a little bit longer than the bait itself, that's plenty of length because you need kind of a stiffer leader material when you're fishing with braid, because braid is so limp that if used by itself and you tie it directly to the bait, it's going to give the bait plenty of great action, and it's a really good line for using with a walking bait. But because it's so limp, it tends to kind of snag on the hooks. It'll actually fold and go back towards the back hooks pretty easily, and it's going to be frustrating trying to untangle those hooks all day long, especially if you have to make a repeat cast to a fish that misses the bait. So I use a stiffer line, so monofilament is a really good one. And another reason why monofilament over fluorocarbon is the deal is because monofilament floats and fluorocarbon sinks, and I don't want a line that sinks and pulls this nose down even just a little bit. So that's why I use a fluorocarbon leader. It's really just about keeping the line out of those treble hooks. Okay. One thing I do need to point out is changing out your treble hooks for premium treble hooks is really important. With really any type of hard bait where they have treble hooks on there. So I end up swapping these out for the Hayabusa TBL 930s. Super sharp, and they also have that NRB coating on them, which makes them even more kind of slick. It's almost like a Teflon coating that goes on your line or on your hooks to enable you to get even better penetration with the hooks. So treble hooks, really sharp ones, are really important with this technique. Next, we've got the rod. I like to use a 7.3 medium heavy. That's kind of my standard for walking baits. Sometimes I go up to like a 7.6 medium heavy. You'd think because you're trying to impart a lot of action to this, like a jerk bait, that you'd want a shorter rod. But actually, I really like the longer rod because it helps me make really long casts, which I often do with these baits, and it gives me good leverage. You know, I can just kind of sweep the rod back to set the hook and get that slack out. So, you know, between long casts and good hook sets, that's why I like a slightly longer rod. And if I'm using bigger ones, that's kind of bigger, you know, walking baits, that's generally when I go to a 7.6. But so today we're fishing the 7.3 medium heavy Versa series, and then we're using a high speed gear ratio, 8.1 to 1 gear ratio reel. All right, so that's the tackle. Let's go ahead, get started fishing, and let's go through some of the key things to remember when you're fishing a walking topwater bait. All right, so let's talk about how to fish this bait, because that's very important. There's a bunch of different hard baits, or there's a bunch of different baits in general that you really have to impart the action to them. You know, if you're throwing a crankbait or something like that, you can cast it out there and reel it back in, and it's going to impart its own action. Although, you know, with most baits, you still want to impart some action just to customize the retrieve on any given day. But with a walking bait, you can't just cast it out there and reel it back. You've actually got to work this bait, and it's all about imparting action through the rod and then reeling in the slack as you go with the reel. And so essentially what you do is you cast it out there, and you're gonna have a bunch of, oh my gosh, well, that's not a great example, because you shouldn't just cast it out there and the fish hits it, although that does happen, obviously. But usually you've got to impart the action. That's hilarious. All right, come on, man. Let me do this demonstration, and then we'll get to you. But essentially, you're gonna cast it out there. You can, as with other baits, you know, let it sit and you know, let the ripples disperse. You know, we ended up getting a bite like that. But this bait, it's not like a popper where I'm trying to keep it in the strike zone for a long period of time. I'm gonna be moving pretty fast with it. But anyways, you kind of start out with semi-slack line, and then you're gonna use the rod tip with a downward motion to create that side-to-side action. And you're popping the rod tip, allowing that bait to go kind of like 180 in each direction, and you're putting slack into the line each time you pop it. So you're pulling the slack out real quick with the pop of the rod tip, and then kind of letting the slack go back into the line when you raise it back up. All right, so each motion is pop the rod tip down, pull the slack out, and then bring the rod back up slightly to put it back in. And that's going to allow that bait to have that freedom of movement to walk side to side. And that is a big key. And it's gonna take a long time to figure out this motion. You know, it's just something that takes a little bit of practice. I've done it so long that it's just kind of second nature. And another big key is just making sure that you're reeling in the slack just at the right speed to, you know, make sure that you're not, you know, reeling in too much slack or not reeling in enough. So it is a big balancing act when it comes to fishing this bait and working it. Okay, you can see how I'm just slapping the rod tip down and giving the bait back some slack. All right, so that is the big key. You just got to get into that rhythm. All right, now as far as like the speed of which you work this bait, that's kind of the biggest key. For me, I'm more of the type of guy that I like a very fast walk. Oh my gosh, that was a giant bass. Let's see if I can catch that one. Let's see if I can catch that one. Come on, eat it. Oh my gosh, giant. He got it. Oh my gosh, that's a big one. It's not a giant, but super quality fish. Look at this sucker right here. Only got the back. I'm gonna swing him in. Oh man. Oh man. Look at that. It's a beautiful thing, man. It's a nice little 3.5 pounder. Thought he was way bigger than that the way he was hitting it. But anyways, what I was saying before that fish rudely interrupted us is that I like working it fast to start out with. I think that the draw to this bait is really in its ability to imitate a fleeing bait fish. And you know, when a bait fish is fleeing for its life, it's going quick, you know, and so I like to move it pretty quick. So I'm going to start like this. And another reason why I think that this is important to reel it or work it really fast is that if you start to get a bite, you can then start to slow down. And I think that one of the things that happens, just like with a jerkbait, is if you're working a jerkbait fast below the surface and a fish is following it, that stopping action, there's a fish right there, that just stopping the bait, really, you know, the fish is still moving forward, but when you stop that bait, the fish almost kind of runs into it. All right, and I think that can get us a good strike from a fish by itself. So that's one of the reasons why I like to reel it fast, is because you can then slow it down if you start getting a bite. And it's also more efficient, and I also think that it is doing what a walking bait should do, which is essentially, you know, imitating a very frantically fleeing bait fish on the surface. All right, so let's talk about where to fish a walking bait. We've already kind of touched up on it, but I just want to elaborate on this note because I think that's really important. You know, right here we're fishing this riprap bank, and a bank like this is perfect for fishing a walking bait like this, because you can parallel the bank. There's a lot of bait fish that usually congregate on banks like this, and so it is pretty perfect for a walking bait. But you could also fish like a whopper plopper on it, a buzz bait, those sort of things. But when the type of scenario that I feel like a walking bait is the absolute best topwater choice, and I'm also lumping in the walking baits that also have kind of a concave popping mouth, like the evergreen shower blows, or like a pencil popper, those sort of things. Those are very similar. They are walking baits. They create a lot more commotion than, say, you know, this bait right here, you know, the jaywalker. But they're kind of the same category. They're a walking bait, but they're very well suited for calling fish out of even deeper water. But essentially, my favorite scenario is some sort of, you know, offshore structure, whether it's humps or long tapering points or saddles, anything like that, where maybe you've got a little bit of wind. Like today is like the perfect amount of wind that is maybe blowing into that structure. And you don't have to have wind, but it does help sometimes, at least the right amount of wind. But whenever you have those long tapering structures that allow the fish to really corral bait fish into a narrower part of the water column, that's going to be a perfect situation for a walking bait. Okay, so whenever I'm on lakes that have a lot of humps, long points, and saddles, a walking bait's going to be definitely one of the ones that I choose first. You know, and I also think it's really important to have pelagic bait fish, so shad or like blueback herring or something like that. If you have a lake like that, like, you know, Clark's Hill jumps out at me. Clark's Hill has a lot of blueback herring. It also has a lot of shad, and those fish get on those long tapering points and shoals and things like that. And a walking bait is traditionally one of the best presentations for that type of situation. And it doesn't have to be like ultra shallow either. I mean, it could be that the structure tops out at 20 feet. And a walking bait is going to call those fish up in a lot of cases. Now, I will say that the dirtier water, the dirtier the water, the shallower the structure should be to call fish, you know, from you know, if they're hanging around the bottom, you know. So like if it's really, really dirty, you may only want structure that's like, you know, 5 foot below the surface. But in clear water situations, man, you can throw a walking topwater in 40 feet of ultra clear water and still pull them up to the surface. But in general, just to kind of make it a little bit more clear, it's all about those long tapering structures. A walking bait is one of the best to be able to cover those very efficiently and call fish up from the bottom. You know, another scenario that is perfect for a walking bait is whenever the fish are schooling. Whenever you get those groups of fish that are chasing schools of shad around, man, this is a great bait to throw in the middle, or actually lead the school a little bit, cast it like 4 foot in front of where they're schooling, and it is just one of the best because it looks exactly like those bait fish that are skittering away from the melee. The biggest key to that, though, when you're fishing for schooling fish, and this goes with any bait you're fishing, is make sure that you match the hatch as closely as possible, especially when it comes to size, because fish get so hyper-focused on the specific size bait fish that they're chasing in that kind of scenario. Oh, come on, eat it. There he is. There's like a little culvert under the water over there. Oh man, it's too much fun fishing a walking topwater bait. I've had a lot of success. I'd say over all the different categories of topwaters, excluding like frogs and toads, which, you know, when I was living in Florida, that was kind of a big deal. But as far as like hard topwater baits, I'd say that walking baits are my absolute favorite. But anyways, guys, I just wanted to share some of you know, the things that have helped me catch fish with a walking topwater bait over the years. So hopefully this video was really helpful. If you have any questions at all, make sure you drop a comment below. And if you want me to cover a topic of your choosing in a future video, also leave a comment below. Other than that, I'm gonna have a list of all the tackle that I use for fishing a walking bait in the description below. And also just want to remind everybody to, you know, help us raise money for this Dick Hiley Bass Classic that's coming up that benefits St. Jude. It's a great cause, and we're really excited to be able to raise money for our team for fishing that. So thank you guys so much for watching. Make sure you like, share, subscribe. I'm going to see you out on the water. Make sure you always trust the process.